Welcome to A Styled Life, the podcast for purpose-led female founders and senior leaders ready to use style as a powerful tool for confidence, impact and influence. I'm your host, Alex Standley, multi-award-winning personal stylist, speaker and sustainable fashion consultant with 2 decades of experience in the fast-paced world of fashion. Join me as we redefine success from the inside out. This podcast isn't just about clothes. It's about personal power, purposeful style, and creating a life that aligns with your values. So whether you're running a business, leading a movement, or stepping into your next chapter, you're in the right place. Each week, we'll dive into the world of personal style, sustainability, female empowerment, and living with intention through real stories, expert insights, and plenty of inspiration. Welcome back to A Styled Life. There's a version of success that a lot of women I know very well have within their minds, and that tends to look like the diary is full, their reputation is solid, their results are there, they're incredibly successful women. And on the outside, everything looks fine, everything looks great. But there is a real disconnection underneath what's perceived on the surface. And there's a sense that somewhere along the way, the person doing all of that performing stopped feeling fully like herself. And this is the real thread that's going to run through with today's guest. So I'm very excited to have Sarah Aspinall with us today. She is a former London litigation lawyer, TEDx speaker, best-selling author and founder of the SA Method, a nervous system-led approach to sustainable well-being and performance for high-functioning women. Her work explores the hidden cost of holding everything together, why so many women feel unable to switch off, and how to navigate midlife and major life transitions with more steadiness, self-trust and intention. Her world and mine intersect in a very kind of specific place where what happens to a woman's sense of self when she's performing for so long that she's lost that thread back to herself. So I think this is going to be a conversation that a lot of you will really relate to. Sarah, welcome to A Styled Life.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
I know that there's going to be so much to this conversation. As we've said, there's so much overlap in the way that we work with our clients. Can you tell us a little bit more about the SA method and the way that you approach your work with women in midlife?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a nervous system-led approach framework. And that's because I think for years we've approached well-being backwards. We focused on what women should do, how to optimize women and how to optimize their health, exercising more, eat more protein, do more strength training, meditate, sleep more, all the things that we're currently being told. But we've paid very little attention to the state that these women are trying to do all those things from. So most of the women that I work with are already capable. They're very intelligent. They know what they should be doing, but it's not always happening. So the problem isn't necessarily the knowledge that they have. The problem is that they're trying to build healthy habits on top of an already exhausted nervous system. So this nervous system-led approach basically means that we stop asking what's wrong with this particular woman and instead start asking, what state is her body in? And if your body has been stuck in this constant sort of alert mode for years, in this survival mode, which I think a lot of people can relate to, everything feels harder. So decision-making can feel harder. Exercise and doing all of that optimization feels much harder. Rest feels really hard. That's a running theme. Enjoyment, we just forget how to enjoy ourselves and where the joy is. So the SA method basically starts with helping women feel safe enough in their own bodies to actually hear themselves again. And once that happens, once she can feel that way, everything just starts to become much easier.
I love that. I can, relate to a lot of it. I think it's, especially if you've come from a fast-paced, like corporate background, or if you're still in that space, It's something that I have had to, and still am, on a kind of unlearning of bad habits, almost like that constant, needing to be on 24/7 and never taking time. Like, I find it still so difficult to sit and do nothing and rest, and it like, oh, I should be doing something, or that kind of thing. And there's so many things that I've had to put into my routine and my day to make sure that I'm able to make space to be and to, go for a walk and to do the things that I know are really good for my mental health and for my body, everything in my life. But I think it can be so hard to know where to start. And as you said, having that nervous system led approach is really powerful, because you can't load on an overloaded system.
No. And yeah, that high functioning piece is really interesting, like you say, especially if you've come from an ex-corporate background, because for women, the high functioning is really celebrated. And, the woman who gets everything done, is on top of things. We're often the woman that everyone relies on, that comes to for advice. And we don't drop that many balls a lot of the time, sometimes, but not many. And high functioning and thriving is not the same thing.
No.
It really isn't. As a high functioning woman, you just become incredibly skilled at overriding your own needs, just as you said. You might feel really tired, but you keep going instead of resting, or you're overwhelmed, but you keep pushing and performing in the workplace if you're still in that corporate environment. But it just means we're becoming more and more disconnected, but we keep producing the results and we're rewarded for it. So it's this kind of cycle that we get into, I suppose, as high functioning women, and nobody's intervening to help us out, because it all looks good from the outside. Everything looks fine, doesn't it?
I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I have learned in this whole process, is that it doesn't benefit other people for you to, have boundaries or slow down or prioritize yourself. And so it's not going to be a comfortable transition to go from that kind of high functioning, serving everybody else and not yourself. So it's not, it takes time and it takes, effort, and it's not going to be pretty from the offset, but it's worth it for the payoff.
Yeah, because it's become part of your identity, hasn't it? This high functioning is very embedded. And as you say, it's quite difficult to shift that identity. And there's not always a desire to do so if you think that that's what's being celebrated and rewarded.
Yeah.
It's tough.
And it's still very much, that's how society deems success. And that's very much how we've been conditioned to believe that we need to achieve all of those things in order to be successful, in order to be fulfilled. And, for a long time, I thought that, reaching a certain point and climbing the career ladder in a certain way was what would make me happy and fulfilled. And, I was chasing all completely the wrong things for me and actually what I value in life. And I can imagine that you see that a lot with the women that you work with as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things, and it sounds strange to say, but I think one of the things that I noticed most is this kind of grief, actually, with these women. When you really start to dig under the surface, when I'm working one-to-one with women, and it's not dramatic, it's just this sort of quiet grief of a woman who just can't remember the last time she felt like herself. You're playing all of these roles. There are so many roles that we play. And if you're a successful woman, you've got the success, you're loved, you're doing all the things that you thought you were supposed to do. And somewhere along the way, we become the manager of everyone else's lives and stop inhabiting our own. And I heard someone talk recently about a cling film, about how you imagine if you take a roll of cling film from your body and you wrap it around all the people that you are taking care of, servicing, if you like, the family, the friends, the work colleagues, the elderly parents, everyone, and you wrap it around, your life becomes about all of those people. It's no longer about you, because you're not standing separate from it. I just thought it was a really powerful analogy. When I heard it, I was like, God, yeah, that's what we're doing. We're wrapping around everyone. And we do a really, really good job at it. So no one really notices how we're feeling and the weight that we're carrying. And eventually, I think when we get to midlife, the body starts sending signals that just can't be ignored anymore. And that's, I think, at the point at which women perhaps are looking for us, seeking out something, change. They feel that shift is needed.
Well, I think from even just from my early like personal experience of that, I think, you know, your brain is even changing, and from what I understand, like your neural pathways and things like that. So it's like you can't actually continue in that way physically, mentally anymore, because your body's just like, no, we're not doing this anymore.
Exactly. And I think when I'm working with women, I talk about, well, you've had this operating system that worked really well for a very long time, and there's a lot tied up in that with your identity, etc. And once we kind of hit midlife, we need a different operating system. And it's finding out, well, what is that? What does that look like? How do I shift into that? What are the changes that I need to make? And they're not massive changes. They can be really small, but really, really powerful. And yeah, we have to accept that, you know, we've got that choice at this point, which I think is really empowering as well.
And I think that's right. I think it definitely requires a bit of a reframe, doesn't it? Because I think I felt like because you're used to being so capable, and you're, you know, the mental load is huge as a woman and a mother and a wife and everything else, daughter. And I think it's almost like we pride ourselves on that. So when, as you said, you might start dropping some balls and things start to, you know, not quite go how you want them to, it's like that feels like a failure, because you're not, you know, what's the word? You're not performing at the standard that you have been, even though, you know, it's not a performance, it's your life. But that feels hard, I think, when you're used to, you know, being able to juggle all of those balls and keeping them all in the air, and then all of a sudden, you know, a few start dropping, and it's like, oh my God, how do I deal with this?
It's completely incongruent with how you view yourself, with this identity that you've built up. So that feels very uncomfortable. And then add to that the changes that we're experiencing hormonally. Our body starts to change. We feel different. We're getting injuries. You know, we wake up one morning and we've got another one and we don't know where it's come from.
Yeah.
All of that, we start to feel like, God, my body's failing me now as well. And I've got brain fog. And I think the danger is that we then start to, you know, disconnect from the body, and we start seeing the body as something we've got to fix. And something that we feel quite cross about. And the body is actually our best friend, and it's trying its best. And it's sending us all these signals, but we're not listening because we're quite disconnected. But if we can listen, we can then start to address, what does it need now? What does this, you know, new operating system look like?
And I think that disconnection is another thing that is a real synergy in both of our work as well, because I see the same. And it's why I focus so much on identity at the start of my programs as well, because it's actually really hard for women who have become disconnected with themselves to, if you ask them questions about, you know, how do you want to show up, or what brings you joy, or what lights you up, or like do you see the vision for your style being, and they just can't articulate it because they've become so disconnected to themselves and their own personality and what they enjoy and what they get fulfillment from, and they've been so kind of bogged down with all the layers of what they've been told they should and shouldn't wear, and what they need to do to fit into certain environments, and it all gets clouded, and it's really difficult then for them to strip it back and to actually reconnect with the women that they are under all of those layers and all of those labels and everything else. And I think that's why the identity part of it is so powerful, because it's like, actually, who am I without all of those labels, and what do I actually enjoy, and what lights me up, and therefore how do I want to show up, and what does that actually look like? And actually giving time and space to do that work is a huge thing for a lot of women, because they are obviously busy and they're also disconnected. So it's like actually it's a bit uncomfortable going through that process of peeling back those layers and looking at yourself without all of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why style is such a powerful doorway, actually, into discovering, well, who am I now? And I feel like midlife, is the point at which we do start or can start asking those questions, because we're starting to really experience that physically, emotionally. It's too much, and there's all these roles. And so, just as you say, I don't think women lose themselves in midlife. I think it can feel like that.
Yeah.
But I think they start to outgrow versions of themselves that once served them, that are no longer serving them. So that old operating system, and trying to find this new one. So the challenge is that the wardrobe, the habits that you've developed, the roles that you've been playing, sometimes even the relationships that you've built up over that period of time, are still organized around that old identity.
Yeah.
And so that's, it's rarely about the clothes, is it? It's not about that. It's about everything that comes underneath. It's about the expression, exactly as you say. How do you want to show up? And it is about asking those questions, which I know you do with clients. If I'm no longer the woman I was at 35, who am I now? What does that actually look like? And how do I want to show up in the world from that place, from this new place?
I think also what you said earlier about grief is quite true as well in the styling process, because I think when you're kind of shedding old identities and perhaps, stepping into this kind of next version of you, and I don't even necessarily see it as that. I see it more as the kind of stripping back to who you are at your core. I think there is a bit of grief in kind of, you've been holding on to things, like people hold on to clothes as the physical kind of manifestation of that in their wardrobes. They hold on to things that they used to fit into in their 20s that no longer fit them anymore, but they can't let go of that person or that, period of time and what it meant to them and who they were and all of that. And I think there's something hugely therapeutic about being able to let that go and to move forward, because it's like this subconscious feeling of being held back and being not able to move forward because you're not able to let go of past versions of you. And I think there is definitely an element of grief in that, like I'm not that size anymore, or I don't have that lifestyle anymore, or whatever flavor it is, different for everybody.
You're right, though. It's not like the new you that we hear all about, at New Year. It's not, because we've eventually become quite disconnected from our body because we're playing all these roles and we are performing a lot of the time in our 20s and 30s. We've kind of forgotten who we are. And you're right, stripping that away. But I think part of the problem with that process is that we are more often than not outsourcing that. So instead of going inward and trusting ourselves and looking at our intuition and knowing that we know ourselves better than anybody and really relying on that and leading with that, we're going through a sort of era of unprecedented self-monitoring where we've got watches that tell us how we've slept.
Yeah.
It's bonkers. We've got apps telling us how we should exercise and when we should exercise, social media telling us what we should eat and when we should eat it, and if we should eat any of that at all.
Yeah.
Loads of experts now also telling us how to age. Longevity is now a big thing. And so the problem isn't the information because we're being bombarded with it. But the problem is when we stop listening to ourselves. And I think that is when women get to this point, they're not quite sure. They're looking for an answer. But there are so many pieces of information that could be used. And of course, we need to exercise and eat well, et cetera, et cetera. But as we said at the beginning, we can't pile all that on to a nervous system that is really struggling. It's too much. And I see women that no longer trust themselves, no longer trust their own signals, and they'll trust a wearable watch over their own body and what it's telling them. And like we were saying, they'll override that exhaustion, maybe because a device is telling them actually they've recovered. They feel something quite different. Feeling guilty about resting because they've not hit a particular target that they'd set themselves on an app or whatever. What gets lost is that intuition, is that knowing yourself. It's not about creating a new person. So when I talk about this new operating system, the operating system is kind of, as you say, stripping back all these roles and this performance and this sense of self that has been built and that operated really well, that sense of identity. Me as a lawyer, I had to operate in a certain way in order to do that job. Very different to how I was when I was a ballet dancer, very different to how I am now. But it is about stripping that back and say, well, who actually am I underneath all of that?
Yeah.
And can I now make decisions from that place? And you can still, work just as hard as you ever did, but the operating system underneath it is different. It's coming from a different place. For me, well-being isn't about becoming dependent on more data.
No.
And that's sadly where it's headed,
Mm.
where it has been. And that's why women are feeling guilty that why is everyone else managing and I'm not, because I'm trying to implement all these things and I can't do it. But it can be quite simple. It can just be learning how to attune to yourself again.
I think that's so powerful as well, because I mean, not necessarily from my own experience, but I can see that unless you find something that works for your body and for your lifestyle and everything else, then it is just going to feel like a constant battle. And because, as you said, we've got so much opinion now, and I find it so overwhelming because you get one piece of advice over here and then it gets contradicted over here and then you get another one here, and it's just like, oh my God, who's right? What's going on? And actually probably they're all right, but it's just, one of those particular things is going to work for you and one isn't, and whatever. And unless you can listen to your own body and see the impact of whatever it is that's being advised, then you're not going to know what's working. And it was really interesting, actually. I haven't tried it yet, but I went to an event last month and there was a holistic hormone coach there, and she's brilliant. And she was talking about supplements and how, there's so many different supplements that we're told to take, and actually half of them you probably don't need, and to listen to your body. And she was saying about the sway test, which I'd heard about before, but I hadn't thought about using it for supplements. And she was kind of saying that's something that you could try, is using the sway test with your supplements to, like, does your body say yes or no to the supplements? I was like, wow, that's such an interesting concept that I'd never thought of, because I've quite often thought, I'm making these supplements thinking, some of them I know because, I have a blood test and I can see that it's making a difference. But some of them it's like, this is just what I've been told is a good thing to take in midlife for, my particular age or whatever. And you don't know if it's actually doing anything or not.
No, and it's a lot of the advice, it's so nuanced.
Yeah.
I remember a while back, there were two quite prominent figures discussing intermittent fasting, for example, and whether, one was like for women specifically in midlife, and one was like, yeah, absolutely, intermittent fasting is great. The other one was saying, but you shouldn't fast before you exercise. And actually, because all this was being shared on Instagram, on Reels, you're getting tiny snippets. And I'd happened to have read both their books. So I knew, but people were getting so confused. Well, you're both prominent in your field, but you're contradicting each other. They ended up having to do an interview together to discuss that and explain and they were both coming from different places. So one was talking about women who were sedentary, and the other one was talking about women who were actively moving and / athletes. So, if you're a sedentary woman listening to the person talking about athletes, but it's very hard to convey all of that on a short 15-second reel or whatever. So a lot of it is very nuanced, but it is nice to see that, for example, with things like supplements, that we're heading towards a more personalized medication, medicalization of things. Of course, at the moment, that's not available to everyone. If you can afford to pay for that, then great. But you're exactly right. Until you've had blood tests, you don't really know what your body needs.
No.
So we're told, well, everyone needs to be taking vitamin D. I have a blood test. My vitamin D is pretty high. So I don't need to be taking that other than in those winter months. So it really is dependent, and lots of talk at the moment about creatine and the benefits of the brain for midlife women. It does not suit everybody. When you start, I can't take creatine. But it's a multi-million-pound business
Yeah.
supplement. You know, they are expensive, and so people are going to keep pushing them. And that's why it's important for us as women to take a step back and, well, do I actually need this? Is this the right thing for me to do? Because if we listened to everything that we were being told, we'd have to leave our jobs and we would spend all our day doing some form of exercise, meal prep, taking supplements, all the things. We don't have the time. But then again, it can be broken down, which is what I help women do as well, into very, very basic, simplified ways of optimizing your health at the same time, but it's a slightly separate issue. But it's just really confusing for women. And the confusion takes us back outside of our body, seeking for answers elsewhere. And if we strip all that away, our ancestors didn't have all of this. So just, were climbing mountains and foraging for food. They were moving their bodies and lifting heavy things. And so it is more challenging for us, the amount of information that we're getting, for sure.
My mother-in-law quite often says that to me, like about various different things, like when we talk about sustainability, and she says, it's just like going back to what we used to do when we were growing up, like having a milkman and various different, like mending and repairing and things like that. And she always laughs because she's like, everyone thinks that they're kind of reinventing the wheel, or this is like a new thing that we're supposed to be doing, and it's actually just going back to the basics of what we always did. And I think that's very true of, although I think there's a lot to be said for the evolution of millennials, Gen X, that kind of age group. Like, we've done so much more of the inner work and trying to break generational trauma and things like that. There's so much to be said for all of that, but I think sometimes it can come at a bit of a cost, all of the pressure to kind of better yourself and to optimize yourself and to improve things for your children and for future generations. And I think that is an extra level of pressure that perhaps previous generations didn't have
at all. It reminds me, I went to the Health Optimization Summit in London a few years ago, and there was a guy over from the States who's one of the prominent longevity experts, and he was talking about all these different lamps he has in his house, and at this time he goes and sits under this one, and at his desk he's got this other one, and then he goes and lies on another bed, and I was with a friend and we turned to each other partway through and we were like, why doesn't he just go outside? Like, he lives in California. Why is he spending? And these things were hundreds of thousands of pounds, like the bed, and he's obviously, it's interesting, and the science is fascinating stuff, but actually he's just telling us what we were doing back in the day, and I don't need to spend the money. I need to understand the science behind light and the circadian rhythms and how important that is, because again, we've lost all of that. But I can just go outside. So it's got a bit crazy. It's very easy to get sucked into it.
Oh, it's so easy. And I think I've even done things like I try and in the morning, I mean, it's much easier at the moment, obviously, because it's lighter mornings, but even in the winter, I'll do a workout, or even before I do my workout, I'll open the front door and just stand on my doorstep for a couple of minutes, even when it's dark and it's raining and whatever, just for that first light and just, having that fresh air. And I think things like that are so simple, but we do overcomplicate things and think that we need to, have a red light therapy and all this other stuff, which is great. And obviously, if you've got the money to do it, then fantastic. But there are simpler ways to bring these kind of things in. One thing that is an interesting kind of connection for me is, what do you see changes outwardly when a woman starts to regulate internally? Like, do you see that has quite an instant shift in how she's showing up and what that looks like in her life?
Yeah, definitely. Because once you start to trust your body again and you befriend your body and you see it as your best friend that is there to support you, you are naturally going to be a lot more confident in your body. And if you are confident in your body and you know who you are, then you start showing up. I think when I think back to when I was working as a lawyer and what I was wearing then, it was almost, it was a uniform. Everyone was in black, /navy, if you were feeling a bit wild. But, you know, you're going into court, there's an etiquette it's just the way it is. But it also felt like armory. It did feel like I was wearing something to fit in, to perform a particular role. And, you know, that works. And we know that clothing has that impact. So called embodied cognition. So if you, for example, want to be someone that works out, or wants to go and do a workout, you put the gym kit on, you're more likely to work out, and actually you're more likely to perform better during the workout. Similarly with wearing a suit, if you're going into a professional environment. So that's really important. Underneath that is understanding who, just as we've talked about, who is it that I want to show up as? And once the nervous system has managed to settle and we're not bracing against it and feeling, we start to feel safer in our bodies, women open up. They just fully feel able to show up as them and not hide behind something. And you can hide behind your clothes, and your body and your posture and the way that you move is really, really important. We've heard lots about this, about, using certain postures to build confidence, how you walk into a room. It sends messages to other people before you've spoken, before they know who you are, what you're about. And we could put on a suit to go into a professional environment, but if you're going in like this and feeling really embarrassed or shy or lacking in confidence, it doesn't matter what you're wearing. It comes across. So I think that's where that intersection is so important, that you've got to feel like your clothing represents how you actually feel underneath. It's the scaffolding behind that. It's a really important part of how we present to the world and what we want the world to see. So having that confident posture and walking in a certain way comes from feeling safer in the body and understanding ourselves much better.
Definitely. And I think also it's why when you are kind of experimenting with what you enjoy with your style, it's important not to go hell for leather and just kind of, I don't know of an example, but if you've not really been wearing very much color and then you go full up on like a head to toe red suit or something like that, your brain is immediately going to be like, this isn't safe. And then you won't do it again because it's like, oh, that wasn't me. I didn't feel right. It made me feel uncomfortable, whatever it is. And I think it's so easy to do that and then retreat back. So I think it is, I always say about, it's like building a muscle, and the confidence grows when you can do it more gradually. And for some people, they don't need that because they just, they really resonate with whatever it is and feel confident to, go out and wear it. Because a lot of it, for a lot of women that I work with, it's actually validation and being given that permission slip of like, yes, this is what works for you, or yes, this is flattering for you, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like that permission slip because that's what they've always wanted to wear, but they just needed somebody to validate them, and having an expert say to them like, yes, this is right, means more to them than you would think. But I think there is a huge element of safety that can actually hold us back, as you said, with like if your nervous system doesn't feel safe or regulated or whatever, that does impact your style and your choices and what you feel confident to wear.
Yeah. And the two sit side by side. So it's interesting you saying that with style, that's got to be an incremental, for some people, an incremental change. It's almost deeper than confidence. It's actually a belief. It's the belief that your inner experience matters, that you can bring that out for the world to see. And remembering that most women haven't lost self-trust overnight. It's gradually eroded over time. Years of putting everyone else's needs first, ignoring our instincts, overriding what our body's been telling us. So if we're going to, brace this new operating system from a place of safety, at the same time as showing the world that transition with our clothing, then we've got to rebuild the self-trust with small moments. And that might be things like keeping promises to yourself, which we don't often do. Honoring your energy, not feeling like you have to go to another networking event or another if you are completely depleted, because you're not going to show up as yourself if that's the case.
No.
Then you start second guessing yourself. But, you know, listening to your body and becoming aware of that, and those little things then become evidence. And eventually you'll stop looking outside of yourself for all the answers from all the experts.
Yeah.
But you will be able to feel safe, have that belief, and apply that to your style effortlessly. And yes, a lot of women need us to help them make those shifts and get to that point. But I think once they've gone through those small changes and got to that point, then it's worked, and that's what's so lovely to see for both of us, and so lovely to see that transformation.
Yeah, definitely. So for you, in terms of because you've obviously moved through very different stages of your career, and that's clearly impacted like how you show up and what you're wearing and all that kind of thing. What's been, because I know, I mean, for everybody, midlife is often that inflection point where it does make you question a lot of things, and there's a lot of changes going on with your body and your body image, but your body shape as well can often be shifting. What have you found with your own experience in terms of shifting like through your career and how that's impacted your style? But what do you see with your clients as well?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift wasn't necessarily changing careers. I think it was realizing, and this took me a long time, it was realizing that achievement wasn't the same thing as alignment. And being a lawyer gave me status. You say to someone, you're a lawyer, like my mum loved telling people.
Yeah.
It gave me security. It gave me that sense of achievement. But underneath all of that, I was pretty disconnected from a huge part of who I was and how, where I'd got to in my life before that point. And movement, dance had always been my first language. So I was a painfully shy child. That's the identity I had back then. And I was always told, I could hear my mum saying, oh, she's really shy. That became part of who I was. I started ballet when I was 2, specifically. My mum thought that would help me come out of myself. So dance movement was part of my language from a really, really young age. And it did so much for me. I forgot that when I was a lawyer. That just was like a whole other thing that just disappeared. So the movement, the dance, the creativity was me. That was the core of me. So the deepest shift was moving from proving myself with the success and the status and the achievement into more expressing myself. And it was an interesting shift because for years I'd built a life that looked really successful. It was.
Yeah.
But the challenge for me was building one that actually felt like mine. That whole legal career didn't, of course it was me and I was capable and I was successful, but was it mine? And that is what I see with a lot of the women that I work with. It's a similar shift, like their identity has become the role that they're playing, the one that, society feeds us from a really young age. Be the good girl, be amenable, be pretty, be, fill in the blank. All of this stuff that we are taught as girls to that's how we should move through the world. And once we realize, actually, I don't need to do that. I can just be who I want to be and not have fear of judgment. I'm not saying it's easy at all, but we are programmed to worry about what everyone else thinks of us. What if I'm too much? What if I'm too little? What if I'm too colourful or too bland or too whatever it might be? And, I think that's why midlife is such a magical part of a magical season, because I feel like I can just let go of that now.
Yeah.
I've got nothing to prove to anybody. I think I want to role model to my daughter that this is how you can do it. A lot of my clients feel similar, but haven't always, reflected on that and what you're
Mm.
showing to that next generation. I think more than ever, they need to see that, because they're seeing a whole load of other things on social media. We didn't even have that. And look how we
No.
feel. God knows how they're going to feel.
Yeah.
It's demonstrating to that younger generation as well that you can do things differently at a certain point in time when you choose to.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly it's that identity shift that, clients, when they're, like you mentioned, giving themselves permission, giving yourself permission to live a life that is true to you. And, I've listened to podcasts with people who've done end of life care, and no one at end of life is saying, I wish I'd worked harder. I wish I'd showed this person that I could do
No.
X, Y, Z. It's all about relationships. It's all about the ordinary. And I think we're all constantly searching to be extraordinary.
Yeah.
And it's so much nicer living in the ordinary. And I don't mean that in a way that women need to let go of their ambition and their drive. I don't mean that. I mean that you can do all of those things, but live a life that to you feels ordinary because it is who you are.
Yeah.
That you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't have to be this extraordinary looking person, or, you just be you. And the relationships I now have in my life, and this is interesting, like when I'm working with women one-to-one and we talk about the relationships in their life, there are people I don't see as often anymore. And there are people I see more because they are living in alignment with who they are. Their energy is very different to the people who are not.
Yeah.
And so I gravitate more towards that because there's a feeling of more integrity. And so all of this just, it becomes so much more natural. And it honestly just see so many of my clients just breathe this sigh of relief because they're like, oh, yeah, just that's how I want to be. So that's definitely been my journey, and, over a long period of time. It's interesting to reflect on it.
It's so powerful. And I think, as you said, it's powerful to have had that realization so that then you can influence your children as well. Because I think that is, you can say all the things that you want to say to them, but ultimately they're following what you're the actions that you're taking and what you're actually doing day to day. That's what they're watching. They're absorbing all of that. And it's something that I'm so aware of with my daughter because, she's even started saying things recently about, being different or being more individual, or she's so much more aware of what other people think at school or what her friends are doing, or just, and it's so young, like she's only 7, so it's kind of like all of that will just magnify and grow as she comes into being a teenager. And there's so much in those teenage years about needing to fit in and be part of the pack and that whole mentality. And I think the more that you can encourage that self-expression and individuality when they're younger, it pays dividends when they get to that age because they have much more self-trust and much more confidence to be an individual rather than having to, don't get me wrong, obviously, like that's just a rite of passage as a teenager. Like you are in that kind of group mentality a lot of the time, and that's part of growing up. But I think the more that we can instill that feeling of it's okay to be different, it's okay to be an individual and to express yourself in your own unique way, it's really powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioning that. My daughter's 16 now, so we've been through all of that. And I remember us having conversations at the dinner table about what does cool mean? Like, oh yeah, because it's so tribal when you're young. I mean, to be honest, it's tribal at our age as well. When you go on the playground, this idea of cool when you're at school is that you look a certain way, you behave a certain way, they all look the same, they're all doing the same things, they're all, going through these rites of passage at the same time. And actually, if you look at what's cool as an adult, it's completely different. The person that is cool as an adult is different. They've trodden their own path. They're creative. They're thinking outside the box. They're thinking differently to other people. They are wearing, they might be showing up in the world in a very different way to the rest of us. And so those are the cool people as adults. So having these conversations with the children, actually, you feel different, and because you have a different outlook and you are behaving differently, that's cool.
Yeah.
I think you're cool. They just can't see it yet.
Yeah.
But when you're older, everyone else will see it. It's still hard because they've then got to live that day in, day out at school. And it gets to a point, I think, where there's a decision for them to make. Well, do I just make my life easy and do something I don't necessarily want to do to fit in and not be noticed and just have that easy life? Or do I carry on doing the thing that I want to do and hope that other people who feel the same as me gravitate towards me? And that's leadership, that, and it depends. And this is where your identity starts to form.
Yeah.
But I think having a parent that is helping them see their choices at that age. I'm choosing this because I know it will give me an easier time over the next few years. It's not who I am. That's okay. That's an okay choice. Knowing, because they understand who they are. Because you are enforcing that and you're discussing it at home, and that doesn't get lost. If they can hold on to it tightly, they will when they're a bit older. So yes, it's an interesting one, but yeah, absolutely, really important for us to be helping them see that and holding on to it and making informed choices, knowing that they're not changing who they are by rolling their skirt up like all the other girls. They're making a choice that they don't necessarily agree with, but making their life easier in the short term. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting as well because my daughter said to me before about my hair, and she's like, Mummy, the boys say that you look like a boy having short hair, and like, why do you have your hair short? And it's not very kind, is it, Mummy? And I said, well, I don't mind, like, if people are free to have their own opinions. And she said, and I said to her, like, you'll realize, like, as you grow up, you can make whatever choice you want. Like, girls don't have to have long hair, boys don't have to have short hair, boys can have a ponytail if they want to. Like, it's all completely down to individual choice and what feels good to you. I had really long hair, like down to my boobs when I was younger. And I loved that at that time. And now I love having short hair because this is my expression of who I am now. And I think even just having those conversations are really powerful for her because it makes her think about things differently. Because they are having these realizations of what they look like, and the commentary on what they look like is so much younger than we did, I think. So there's so much to unpack, and I think sometimes I can feel a bit of pressure to like say the right thing, but actually, as you've just said, like just modeling it is so powerful.
Yeah, it's so hard for them. The amount of times I have said to my children, it's like in your situation, it's none of my business what that person thinks of me.
No.
My business is how I feel about me. Because again, similar to what we were talking about before, it's outsourcing. And you shouldn't outsource how other people see you. What's important is how you see yourself and how your loved ones see you because of the relationship that you have with them. So I don't care what someone says about my hair. I mean, let's be honest, in the moment I might. But when because we're all slightly vain and, we want to be liked. It's just programmed into us. But actually that initial, just let it go, because it's none of my business what anyone thinks of me.
No.
My business is what I think of myself, because if I don't hold myself up, to these high standards and trust myself and know who I am and how amazing I am, then no one else is going to. So that's the most important place to start. That's really hard for a 7-year-old to wrap their head around. But I feel like if I just keep saying it, it'll be in there. As you say, they're not necessarily going to respond straight away. I had a conversation with my daughter recently, and she's choosing universities and things now. And I think I must have expressed, oh, well, I don't know where the job market's going now, so you might need to think about opening your options. And she said to me, Mum, my entire life, you've told me whatever I choose, I can be the absolute best at. If you pay attention, they really, really do. And sometimes it will come and bite you in the butt. But it's really important that we share what we believe. And it is so much harder for them because they're just being presented with all these, this is what you should look like, this is how you should behave. It's really hard.
I think, as you said earlier in the conversation, though, like for grown women as well, the fear of judgment and of what other people will think of us is what actually keeps us small and keeps us in a box. And that is kind of, without getting very feminist, is what the patriarchy want for women to, to just fit in a neat little box and don't come outside of your box. And I think that is why I feel so passionately about women being able to express themselves and to really, because if you're constantly editing yourself for rooms or for people or for whatever reason, you don't, as you were saying with enclosed cognition, like you don't perform in the same way because you're editing yourself for other people. And therefore, even what you say is kind of edited as well. And it's like, it's a whole kind of vicious circle. And I think that's why I feel really passionately about it, because until you're comfortable, as you said, with yourself and who you are, you're not going to show up in the same way when you're delivering something or speaking to somebody or, whatever it is. It affects all the different areas of your life.
And more often than not, the things that you're creating in your head that you think people might be judging you for, or the opinions they might have, don't exist. They don't see you like that. They have not thought of those things. And if you head down that path and I can't do this because they'll think X, Y, Z. Well, then ask yourself, but is that true? Are you that person? Do you believe that? No.
Yeah.
Well, then carry on. Because even if they hold those beliefs and if they make judgment, that's on them. Again, none of your business what they think. But even if they hold those views, is it true? No.
Yeah, it's such a powerful reframe. I'd love to finish. We'll do our quick fire style questions with you, but I also wanted you to share with us about your midlife capacity check, because I think the women that are listening will find that really beneficial.
Yeah. It's a simple assessment, so it's not a diagnostic framework or anything, for women who feel like they're coping but suspect they're operating closer to capacity than maybe they realize. So it helps them look at areas like energy, stress, recovery, movement, mindset, emotional load, and understand where they're running on reserves specifically. So it's simply about creating awareness, which is what we've been talking about a lot, because awareness is that first step back to making choice. So if we become aware of where we're at, what our bucket looks like, where we're near capacity, we can then start to make choices about what we might change. But a lot of the time, for all the reasons we've just talked about, we're disconnected and we're not aware of what is happening and what we're doing. So it's a check to bring that awareness for women.
That sounds really powerful. And I'll link that in the show notes as well so that people can be directed to it. Okay, so our quick fire style questions. What is the one item of clothing in your wardrobe that you love the most and why?
I think is probably a leather jacket that I bought, I reckon, about 14 years ago. When I was in France. It was an Italian shop, I think.
Amazing.
And it's so beautiful. And I don't wear it loads, but every time I wear it, someone comments and asks about it because it's quite unusual looking. It's not like amazing or anything.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know, it just feels
good.
So good. Yeah. Just feels good to wear.
I think when things have been made well, like Italian craftsmanship with leather is just amazing. And I think that you feel it like when you wear it because it fits differently and then the quality is really lovely. And there's such a psychological benefit to that as well.
Yeah.
And if we opened your wardrobe right now, what would we find way too much of?
Trainers, but specifically Adidas, the Special trainers.
Oh, yeah.
Which I realised there are a lot of on Vinted. Brand new in the box.
Yeah.
It became dangerous. My daughter told me I had to stop. They're Just too many, because I live in trainers and they're so comfortable, but yeah, there's too many.
I think that is the beauty of Vinted, isn't it? I got a couple of because a lot of people say to me, oh no, I would never buy secondhand footwear, and I was like, yeah, but it's not actually secondhand, because most of it's new in the box. Like my Adidas trainers I got on there, and actually they were ones that were sold out everywhere as well, and I managed to get them on Vinted. So I was saying to a client the other day, like, search new with tags, and you'll find so much footwear on there.
Less than half price. I mean, brand new. I know. And it's so exciting when you get a bargain.
Such a buzz. And what is an outfit or a trend that you look back on and think, I really regret that, and why?
Honestly, the trend I regret most isn't necessarily a piece of clothing. I think it was dressing for approval. I think it was, there's not one particular thing like skinny jeans or whatever. It was, there were years where I dressed for the role and the expectation, which, there was a uniform essentially as a lawyer. Dressing for the environment that I'm going into, for fear of judgment. How can she walk into that's not appropriate for this environment, rather than for myself? I think a lot of women can relate to that. And the older I get, the less interested I am in looking right, and the more interested I am in feeling like me.
Yeah.
We've all had that where we put on an outfit to go somewhere. I just like, this just isn't awkward. I feel uncomfortable. I just want to wear something that feels like me. But thankfully, with people like you, we can start to appreciate what that means.
Yeah.
Because feeling like me, going to a networking event, I can't wear joggers. Obviously, it's got to be appropriate for the environment, in the sense of what is it that I want people, how do I want people to see me as, but in this professional environment? Because I don't want them to see me as a mum. If I'm going into a business networking event, I want them to see me as a serious businesswoman. I'm still wearing, that's still we have lots of different parts of us, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
I still want them to see that part of me. If I'm dancing and I'm teaching a dance class, that looks very different to when I'm in a business environment. It's still me. It's still a really big part of me. So I think it's that. I think it's dressing appropriately for the environment I'm in as me, not as how I think other people expect me to dress.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. This has been such a powerful and interesting conversation. I'm sure that the women that are listening will take so much away from it. Can you share with us where is best to connect with you as well?
Yep. My website, sarahaspinall.com, or on Instagram, Sarah Aspinall as well. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
it's been
Alex.
Brilliant.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to A Styled Life. If today's episode resonated, the best way to support the show is to share it with another trailblazer or leave a quick review. And if you're ready to align your style with your next level of impact, head to the show notes to book your free style strategy call. Because when your style aligns with your purpose, the world takes notice.